I'm Hank Stoltz, and this is Central Mass Chronicles, where we look at local, state, and national issues, but we put that Central Massachusetts spin on it. And we're pleased to have our panel here today as we talk about the issues of the day. And let me begin with Brad. Let's start with you. We've got Brendan and Randy here as well. But let's talk a little bit about the Midtown Mall. Now, the Midtown Mall, depending on who you talk to, is the biggest eyesore that is actually physically stopping the resurgence, the renaissance of Worcester dead in its tracks just by its very physical presence. Or, if you talk to some individuals, it is an incubator for individuals who are not able to afford rents anywhere else, and here is an actual downtown location for them. If you talk to the owner, Dean Marcus, as I did a couple of weeks ago, he'll start telling you about architecture that you can't find anymore, and Woolworths used to be here, and talk about some rose-colored glasses. Dean Marcus, at least when I was speaking to him, I think had those a little bit. But if you talk to the city manager, it's an eyesore and it's stopping progress. Should the city take it by eminent domain?
Well, that's an interesting question. I've had some great experiences.
Good luck with this one.
Yeah, I've had some great experiences there. I think I bought my tux for my high school prom downstairs, and I have a friend from Chess Club who ran a computer store there. So I always go over and get my computer parts. If you ever have a broken power strip, or power connector, it's a great place to go. Inexpensive and cheap, and I love that. But as for the mall itself, he's had it for a long time, and so I'm thinking to myself that perhaps there's another reason why he doesn't want to develop it, and it could have something to do with recapture depreciation, or selling the place could have a huge tax issue, and there may be other solutions. So I really hope they could just sit down and try and figure out what the real problem is.
Well, this is part of it then, Brendan. He's owned it since 1980, and a part that I think a lot of people can't figure out is, according to all newspaper reports, he has had good offers, good bona fide offers. The city has brought some people in to meet with him to have him sell it, and there seems to sometimes just be this undercurrent that he's got some sort of an axe to grind with the city. Now, I don't know if any of that is true, but could there be some other reason why he doesn't want to sell it?
It's interesting. Like Brad has memories of the place. Like my childhood was spent down there. As soon as I was old enough to take the bus downtown, the arcade that was there, Kim's, which it's jewelry now, but used to be able to buy throwing stars and switchblades when I was a kid. That was a lot of fun. But it was a destination that you could go to. And I think that's one of the things that gets missed is that while it still is serving a population that is shopping down there, I try and cut through the place anytime I'm downtown. There's clearly people that are in there making use of the business. The question is, does it have the volume of people that should be in a space that big with the number of businesses that could be down there? Yeah, and I think you have to ask yourself, like, what is the rationale for not doing anything with the building? As a business owner, I take every free penny I have and I dump it back into the business. And if you look at I run an ice cream shop, right? Like I'm destined to failure based on the odds from a food service perspective, yet every single penny I have goes in there because of the passion for the business. So I look at it from that perspective and ask myself, why wouldn't you be taking whatever equity is in the building to build it back up and get more out of it potentially as a return? So yeah, I think that's a valid question, and whether it be hoping that maybe the city comes in forcefully and takes it by eminent domain, because there's money that goes along with that. It's not just thievery, right? We're not just taking it without any return, or that long-term something comes up that's a better offer. I don't know.
Well, I think he clearly, Randy, hasn't put a dime back into it since he bought it in 1980. But he, for whatever reason, he's got the Pentecostal churches down on the bottom floor and some on the upper floor. I guess the place is probably hopping on a Sunday at 10 or 11 o'clock. The rest of the time, like Brendan said, I walk through there quite a bit too. There's 3-4 people just walking, and I don't see where they're actually in any of the stores. I don't know how anybody is actually surviving there. But here's the question: so can the city just come in and say, we don't like the way that you're doing business, you're out, we got somebody better?
Well, that's actually a really interesting historical question, right? I mean, just a brief history, John Locke, the political philosopher that talked about property rights, life, liberty, and property, has to be protected under a neoliberal order, which we now live under, influenced the American Constitution and Thomas Jefferson. They said the same exact thing, only Locke said life, liberty, and property, and Jefferson thinks property sounds a little crass. Why don't we go pursuit of happiness? But this is America, that you have a protection for your life, liberty, and your property. So the question is, can the government take your property when they decide it's good for the entire population, for the common good, as they call it, right? And there was a famous case in Connecticut that said the government can take your property for the common good, because no one had resolved this that case was about 15 years ago, where you're talking about something as untragic as economic development?
Right.
And could you take it for something as not vital, but economic development's just a good, and can the government do it? And it was decided they could. So philosophically and legally, they can take it. And then,
I was just going to say, Randy, just because this seems so targeted, like you're going to build the DCU or something, or a ballpark. Like, I get that. And somebody is going to say, well, I think my property should be worth more, and here's what we're going to give you, and we're going to take it by eminent domain. This seems very targeted, right? We think the Midtown Mall is the problem. Chicken Place to the left of it, you're fine. Head Shop to the right of it, you're okay too. But the Midtown Mall, you got to go.
well, the Midtown Mall, as we all know, is worse than almost every other place, right? The city manager said it, he's right that it smells. Yeah, I know about these Pentecostal churches and these other storefront churches. They're not so crowded. They're small entities. They start a church. Some years later, they dissolve or they move. This is not real development. And even the stores that are in there's some nice ones. There's a nice little place to eat, and there's some nice ones. But they're underutilized, as Brendan said, completely. So if you look at the Denholm building where I am, and that was a department store, like Woolworths was a department store, and you look what's done in the Denholm building, we have a lot of nonprofits. It's not the most elegant building in the whole world, but it's pretty good, right? You look at that building, which is started in the same place, and it has absolutely nothing going on but people who can pay $8 a square foot anywhere else in the city, other places in the city if it's not down there. So I think the city is right. When you add it all together, they're right. Dean Marcus didn't put any money into redeveloping it. And then everybody knows the Mankitti Group, the outside buyers who've come and bought everything on Main Street, made a very good offer to them. And they had a partial agreement on a PNS. And in the last minute, Dean Marcus walks out on the Mankitti Group, who now bought Frank Carroll's and everything else in town.
So let me ask you this, guys. So the Mankitti Group comes in, but you know what? They bought Shacks, but I don't see this new philosophical bookstore in Shacks. I mean, when are they going to start? And it hasn't been that long for Frank Carroll's property. But what if they just sit there and say, we got a good price on this, and they just sit there and don't do anything for 2 or 3 years? I mean, is Dean Marcus, what are his kind of rights? You own it. Well, all you guys are small business owners.
You know, well, we had an older building, the Osgood Bradley building, and it certainly was losing money. By the time you pay your taxes, your upkeep, your insurance, somebody to maintain it and everything else, it wasn't losing money. So we were sort of forced into redeveloping it. We found a good developer, Vision Development, Rick Schaefer, The Edge. Well, I have to imagine that the Midtown Mall is probably not giving a good return on capital, if positive at all. I'd also probably suggest that Dean's son, Josh Marcus, he probably may not want to scrum the halls and clean it up. And so through patience and time, I have a feeling it will resolve itself, rather than the city take a huge step forward and say, we're going to take it. We don't know what it's for, but we just want to take it because it's not being maintained. It just seems like a tough precedent.
This is Brendan Ware. I don't know. Dean seems to kind of have this view of it, of the memories that you guys have, but he's sort of, I don't know, seems to sell it that he still sees it that way. Whereas the city manager, and we'll wrap up with your comments, he just goes in every day and it seems to just make his head explode that he looks at it and I mean, I think really feels that it's stopping the resurgence.
Yeah, and I think this is, the building in a weird way has become almost like a foil for gentrification talks that are constantly happening in this city that I think we're a little early on to be worried fully about. There's no reason why, if that building under the current ownership or under new ownership was redeveloped, rehabbed, however you want to call it, that those businesses that are there couldn't find greater success than they currently have now. And I think that's what we need to be thinking about, not necessarily all the hypotheticals that we can't map out because they're hypothetical, but the reality that we need to help retail flourish in the city as that landscape changes nationally, regionally, locally, and that's a key component of it, being right in our hub downtown.
I'll tell you what, we're going to bring you guys back and let's do gentrification the next time around. Just coming up straight ahead, let's talk a little bit about Elizabeth Warren. Let's talk some national politics. She is our senior senator. We also maybe have Congressman Seth Moulton, who might be thinking about getting into the race. And I want to take kind of your temperature is if you think either of them has a chance, and what does it mean for Massachusetts if the two of them decide to get into the Democratic primary? And we'll do that straight ahead on Central Mass Chronicles.
Local news from Central Massachusetts for Central Massachusetts.
Worcester police releasing new information. No working smoke detectors and extremely cold weather made battling a fire even more difficult. A tractor-trailer rollover caused delays on the Pike in Auburn. About $42,000 of cocaine is seized from a Webster apartment.
Reporters in the field. And an in-depth local forecast. Worcester News Tonight on Charter TV3.
Charter TV3 and UMass Memorial Healthcare have teamed up to bring you the latest news and trends in healthcare. Health Watch, presented by UMass Memorial Healthcare, brings you the healthcare topics that are important to you. From stroke prevention to allergies, skincare to sports injury prevention, and nutrition to pregnancy, Health Watch at UMass Memorial Healthcare informs you on the issues that affect you on a daily basis. Health Watch on Charter TV3. For extended interviews with UMass Memorial Healthcare experts, log on to our website.
Hi, I'm Dale LePage.
And I'm Jennifer Ankowiak from Charter TV3's entertainment show, WooTube.
On every episode of WooTube, we bring you local music and comedy videos.
Our monthly interview segment with music and comedy venue owners and the best upcoming events in your area.
It's Central New England's music and comedy videos. Plenty of events you'll want to attend and so many places you'll want to be. WooTube.
Yeah, you only think the conversation stops. The conversation just keeps on going. Glad to be back here with the panel for Central Mass Chronicles, and we're going to be talking about Elizabeth Warren. As you all know, she is running for president. Her official announcement was in Lowell just a short time ago. She's been running for a little while now. But, Brendan, as we know, she also has some problems in that for a long time now, she has come under fire since her race against Senator Scott Brown for claiming that she has this Native American heritage. And she's kind of changed her story a little bit, but the Washington Post just recently put out a story that said, well, here you are, Texas bar, and there you are writing down American Indian when it comes to your ethnicity. And you would have thought that that would have sunk her. She clearly does not, because it was only a few days after that she had her official announcement. What do you think about her candidacy?
I'll be honest, I'm not entirely thrilled about it, but it has nothing to do with ancestry. It has nothing to do with gender. I'm looking at it from a perspective of somebody, so I'm 43 years old. I consider myself an old person on the wrong side of the old Abby Hoffman line, right? Like, don't trust anyone over the age of 35. And I see it, I find it very frustrating. I guess I have to be ageist, right? That I feel like the demographic that is most interested in being president in the last two cycles, just by a matter of age and perspective, and I think those two things do intersect, are not necessarily keeping a good eye on what everyone behind me is looking for. And I'm not hearing a lot of exciting things coming out of the current crop of candidates. I think the two that I'm actually most interested in, one's not running, but Gavin Newsom. Like, I disagree with a million things that Gavin Newsom stands for as governor of California, but I actually find him as a really attractive candidate, because I think he's actually looking behind him as well from an age perspective. Cory Booker's another one. And when you think, from my perspective, the two most dynamic presidents that I think we've had, JFK and Barack Obama, I think age does play a factor in that. Your ability to actually be a little bit more in tune with what people younger than you are expecting, not what people your age and older are want or expect.
Well, it's interesting, Randy, that it might not be what is going to be centered on, or the media is really centering on, with the question of her claiming to be a Native American, or how her story has changed. But maybe she has this populist message, and I don't know, it would seem to be one that would resonate about anti-Wall Street. But maybe at 69, and maybe with who is in this race, maybe now just ended up not being her time.
Yeah, her time was 4 years ago, right? She should have run when Sanders ran, and Clinton was weaker than everybody knew. That's probably why Sanders did so well, along with the demographics and young people. And that was her time. She missed the boat, right? And what she's trying to do now is, her idea that income inequality is the biggest problem in America, of course she's correct, she's right, but her wealth tax has been rejected in all the industrial countries that have tried it. They found we can't find the wealth. We can find your income, but the wealth is too hidden, right? So her solutions are not nearly as good as her identification of the problem. And there are lots of Democrats who identify that as the problem. I'm surprised you didn't go with Beto O'Rourke. He's a young person. You're not the biggest fan of Beto's?
Not a huge fan.
No?
Well,
all right. So, but...
Also not a resident of Texas, so...
Yeah. The Massachusetts angle, like will Molden, will they help Massachusetts? Yeah, I mean, of course, but Jim McGovern's the head of the Rules Committee in the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives, right? That's real. Jim McGovern's going to help, right? So will these people, have an advantage more towards us. Like, for instance, I still don't know why why Boston was not selected by Amazon as a site. Like you would have thought, right? Now, if we had a Democratic president and Amazon leaves New York and comes here, would the Democratic president push for that, and would it happen? Probably. There's a good chance that that really could occur. So, you know, it might help us, but I think the country's kind of tired of Democratic nominees from Massachusetts losing. And I think that that's probably not what the Democratic Party is putting their hand up for again right now.
Although she's more of a populist, Brad. I mean, she isn't sort of that Northeast liberal the way that we normally would think of it.
Yeah, she's definitely a populist, you know, trying to, you know, go against Wall Street and the banks and everything. Personally, I was disappointed she didn't support an audit of the Federal Reserve, but that's just me, one of my pet issues. But I think we have like an easy ride for Democrats in Massachusetts because the Republican Party isn't as strong as it could be. And so once they leave the borders of Massachusetts, they have a rough time in a national primary. That's what I see coming, especially when it seems like people just want to talk about the Indian stuff instead of the issues.
They really do. I mean, people fixate on that. So Seth Moulton, I saw him the other day. He's addressing the Brookings Institute. He's got a pretty good backstory. He's talking about our involvement overseas. I don't think he's particularly a hawk. He is what I think this race probably doesn't have a lot of, Brad, and that is a moderate Democrat. Biden, if he does decide to get in, might fill that role, although I think Brendan's got a good point about who we might be looking for. Congressman Seth Moulton's 40 years old. The far left or the progressive wing of the party hates him for taking on Nancy Pelosi, but could he do well, do you think, in Democratic primaries?
I really don't know. I mean, he is a congressman. It's sort of hard for a congressman to take that next jump. Usually it's a senator. But I do know he's been out there trying to make his brand known, going around helping veterans run for Congress all around the country. So he may have some backing around the country that, you know, just pops up at election time from the work he's done, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, what do you think, Seth Moulton?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Brad, but I'd take it a step further and say I think this is actually indicative of one of the problems we have running candidates from Massachusetts. When you hear terms like coastal liberal, right, like we actually are that, right? Like even if we're conservative in Massachusetts, we're still more liberal, right, oftentimes in the eyes of the rest of the country, and we're not really seeing the country through the same lens that I think you know what we almost disparagingly refer to as flyover country is seeing. And I think that's the challenge, right, is whether you're talking about Appalachia or the Rust Belt, these are all demographics that have been spoken to as if someone's going to swoop in from Washington and save them for decades, generations, and it hasn't happened. And oftentimes those voices are coming from the coasts where the economies are stronger, a little bit less vulnerable to upheaval. And I think that's the challenge, is that we're not seeing a lot of candidates who are speaking directly to the folks that are angry and actually do need some sort of help in terms of getting their lives back on track economically.
All right, I think next show, and then I'll let you wrap this segment up, but I think next show I just want to have somebody remind me. So gentrification and should New England simply secede from the union? All right, wrap this up with Elizabeth Warren and Seth Moulton.
Elizabeth Warren, her big issue is the financial services industry, right? Mm-hmm. And she went after the financial services industry. And I was like a big cheerleader for her, like, yeah, that's great, until she disagreed with Timothy Geithner and Barack Obama. Like when she said these guys they're not getting a good enough deal for the American public, I split with her. Because I like Barack Obama and Timothy Geithner. I think that they saved, along with George Bush and Hank Paulson, saved the United States of America from a depression. And when she picked on them as not appropriately hard against the financial services industry, then I just said, you know, that's too far for me. I'm with those guys.
All right, hey, coming up right here on Central Mass Chronicles, we're going to be talking pot. Pot shops are coming. I am assured that they are even coming to Worcester, Massachusetts. As a matter of fact, there might be one right downtown on Main Street. And we also want to talk a little bit about what I think a lot of law enforcement is focusing on now in the legislature is, and how if you stop somebody, what would be a test? Is there like a DUI test that you can have for somebody who has smoked marijuana? And the answer is, short answer is no, but we'll kick it around a little bit as well right here on Central Mass Chronicles.
We're proud to lead with high school sports stories in our sportscast.
Local sports have a unique way of bringing families together, bringing generations together.
People remember where they came from. They remember their high schools. They remember their playing days. I learned a lot because I played high school sports.
I absolutely loved every minute of playing high school sports.
Certainly our goal is just to cover the game and to highlight the positive of high school and local college sports.
There's no other place I'd rather be, and there's no other job I'd rather do.
They are the greatest offender of the pink tax. You guys ever heard of the pink tax?
They say on average, women pay an extra $1,351 every year just for being a woman.
Yeah, don't preach to me about women and better treatment of women when you are basically sticking it to women when they buy your products. You're listening to the Jim Polito Show, your safe space.
It would revolutionize government as we know it and politics forever. That's how petty she is. That's how little she is. That's what a small person she is. That's why she shouldn't be our senator. That's why she shouldn't be in the White House. I mean, it's just ridiculous. You sit here and I do a radio talk show. I could do a better job than these people. Because the answer is they're protecting their own rear ends. These big, fat rear ends from sitting in those chairs, those big, comfortable chairs. God help us. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Let's just talk about pot shops in general when it comes to Worcester, because I think that Worcester is, a lot of people, Randy, I think are just wondering why we haven't been a little bit more proactive. Why don't we already have some of these pot shops open? But it's interesting that there, for example, Shrewsbury Street seems dead set against having a pot shop at all. And I'm not sure how they're going to keep it out, and I'm not I personally think that they're probably kind of missing the boat on that. But second, it's interesting that I've run into some people who are like, oh yeah, we're going to have these pot shops. They're worried about traffic. They're worried about different things. But the fact that somebody is going to put a pot shop or is suggested putting a pot shop where the old Elwood Adams is, that seems to have a few people who are like, but it would be right on Main Street? Well, I don't know. If I put it in one neighborhood or I put it right on Main Street, I'm not sure what difference that is, but it seems to have people talking just the fact that it would go on Main Street in the old Elwood Adams building.
It's a great idea. It's a great idea. Like, yeah, Elwood Adams is the perfect building, right, for it. You'll have parking, you'll have street parking, you'll have everything like that. You know, the one that, I think it's Spencer, the one that's going on, the problem is too many people want to go. We need people on Main Street. It's a perfect idea. The fact that it's across kitty corner from the courthouse, who cares? Maybe one complaint is that we should do more for people who were arrested for marijuana, for using marijuana, selling small amounts of marijuana. Now we made it legal. Why don't we employ some of those people in the marijuana industry, right? Instead of stigmatizing them continuously. So I just think that I wasn't for legalization because I just think that people who are not in the best situation in life just will abuse marijuana. But now that it's legal, why don't you treat it like any other industry? And we need storefronts to be taken on Main Street, and that's a great storefront.
Actually, Brendan, I mean, yeah, just from a business standpoint, it does seem as if you'd have parking downtown, and we want people walking around downtown. This will bring people walking around downtown.
Yeah, I actually stopped into the community meeting for that facility at the proposal at Elwood Adams, and it was funny. There were some folks there who were concerned about lines, traffic, parking. And that was what I offered up to the crowd. That this is Main Street in the second largest city in New England. Like the last thing that we should be worried about is a line of people on the sidewalk on Main Street in the second largest city in New England. And the flip side of that too is if you go downtown at night, which clearly a lot of people don't because they think it's a ghost town. The Palladium is selling out shows almost every day of the week, and there's a long line down the sidewalk of people, and it works itself out just fine. Cultivate out in Leicester. They were one of the first to open in the Commonwealth back in November. They're down to around a 10-minute wait. And there aren't that many more online. There was certainly a novelty factor after those two stores, one in Northampton, one in Leicester, came online. You had people flooding in from other states. That's why you had that 5 and 6 hour wait right out of the gate. We just had while we're taping, another one come on in Hudson today. So here in Worcester County, we can start seeing some of those the demand dissipate. I think the big concern now is when Worcester starts bringing them online, how many other communities are we going to be competing with for traffic, and will we see the lines or the crowds that we're actually now preparing for as if it's a downside. If there's any fault to be had there, I think it's probably on the state side. There probably should have been a mandate to get more, if not all, of these licenses online at once, so that you wouldn't have small towns like Northampton and Leicester being flooded with out-of-state customers, and instead, sort of an even keel of sales. But we missed that boat, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, did anybody at that meeting? And I'll be curious to see if Hudson really does have some of the parking concerns that some of the others. I mean, have they now prepared for something that is 2 months ago as opposed to being right now? But at that meeting, were people concerned about the fact that it was going to be right on Main Street, that somehow not anti-pot shop, but anti-pot shop on Main Street? Because I've heard that from a couple of people.
No, and I didn't. There was nobody there who seemed to be, and I think that would be problematic if we did take that view, because we've got a large number of liquor licenses on Main Street, right, for pouring establishments. And those two things go hand in hand at this point, right? We're talking about intoxicating substances, and if we start dicing them up, especially those that are legal, in terms of this one's good, this one's bad, we get into some really murky territory there. I think you're going to find that a lot of the existing restaurants downtown are going to really enjoy the extra traffic that they're going to see from people coming into Worcester, or people who are already in Worcester coming downtown to make purchases, and then probably going to become patrons of those existing businesses.
Absolutely. Walk across the street, Dead Horse Hill. It's a great point. Brad, what do you think about
Well,
pot
it's
shops?
voted on by the people, and so they should have a right to put their stores up. People have property, and if they want to put a store in, that's great. I do think we should be careful about it, just in the sense that we aren't the first community to put in a store. We should definitely look at the other communities throughout Massachusetts, see the problems and headaches they've had, to see if we can prevent any of them. If traffic is that problem, then hey, let's try to figure out a way around it. And likewise, we're not the first state to do it. There are other states. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. I'm sure we're smart people, and we can figure out good solutions.
Yeah, and I mean, they're coming. They're going to be here soon. Randy, one of the things that people really are talking about, and I've heard from our legislators and certainly from law enforcement, this concern, though, that once the pot shops are up and running, people who are driving, and that there really just isn't any kind of a test. There isn't a DUI test the way that we have now for under the influence of alcohol.
Yeah, the commission apparently was going to say that the police can ask questions of people about, have you been smoking marijuana, and then on, right? And then they reversed course, because they said that if you haven't Mirandized the person who you're asking questions to, then you don't have a right to start interrogating them to build a legal case. So then I said to myself, but in alcohol situations, they always say, did you have any drinks tonight, right? So then I said, well, how's that different than asking someone if they smoke a joint? And I'm thinking, I don't think you should have to Mirandize somebody if you say, in the last hour, have you smoked a joint? Right? I think that part should be allowed under law, but apparently this commission is a little leery about letting people do that without being read their full rights.
I think part of the problem with marijuana, though, is if you smoked a joint last week and you ended up having blood work done as part of an arrest, that's still going to show up in your system, whereas the half-life in your system for alcohol is relatively short. So the breathalyzer, the BAC is going to be more immediate in showing what you've ingested, which is, I've always been a fan of the idea. I know it's not popular in law enforcement, but the idea of impairment being the standard that we use when it comes to arrests for your driving. I don't care whether it be you just drank a fifth of Jack Daniels or you downed a bottle of Benadryl. We don't have a test for that either, right? But that's going to impair your ability to operate a motor vehicle. The impairment is what we should be using for a standard. And I think we can probably all remember a time where you would see or hear about somebody walking a yellow line in the street, right, to see if they were impaired. We've moved so far away from that because of the reliance on technology, breathalyzers, blood alcohol tests. But those are really just arbitrary numbers that the law enforcement and legal communities pull out to say this is the 0.08 is the number we're going to rely upon. It doesn't really speak to the level of impairment that somebody is dealing with.
That's where we have to leave it for this week. For all of us here from Central Mass Chronicles, thank you so much for joining us.